Hello and welcome to the HRD Live Podcast. This week I was joined by Amanda Cusdin, Chief People Officer of Sage. Amanda and I discussed the mammoth effort behind Sage's cultural transformation and how it transformed their business, and everything from performance management to wellbeing. Enjoy. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Great, thanks very much. Good to be here.
So first of all, what was the impetus behind the cultural transformation you enacted at Sage?
And it was a number of things, really. The first was that we recognised that the workforce was changing, and often people talk about many generations in the workplace, and we literally had everyone from people in their late teens to people in their late 60s working together and everything in between. So we recognised we needed to really change and evolve our culture and create a culture that really created an environment where everyone of any age can thrive and bring their skills, and also an organisation that people of all of those generations wanted to work for and saw something attractive in. So that was the first reason. The second was we're on a transition to become a SaaS company, a very customer-centric SaaS company, and that meant we needed to put customers at the heart of everything we do. And we've always been very good at customer service, but it's moving more to customer success and how we help our customers be successful when they're using our services and solutions and products, but also when they just phone us for advice and help on however we work with them. So it's really been about how we develop a very cultural-centric, a customer-centric mindset in everything we do, and how we help everyone, whether dealing with a customer directly or not, to have that mindset at the front. And I think the final reason was that Sage has grown over the last 40 years through acquisition. So lots of smaller companies coming together. And when those companies come together, it means not everything works as seamlessly as it could. So in some cases we had different systems, different ways of working, different policies, different procedures. And part of the transformation has also been to look at all of those and to streamline, but also to take away what we call pin and pinch points, things that don't work as well for some people, so that it's really easy for people to get their jobs done.
Interesting. It's funny how you say you have all these different people coming into one place from different groups and different backgrounds. What do you think are the main challenges then when you have them together, and how do you go about solving that when you have those different people in the same place?
I think it's helping different generations understand how they work together. So people who've been in the workforce for many years will be used to a more hierarchical organisation where you ask for permission, where you respect people who've been there longer than you, who've got more seniority. Whereas younger people come into the workforce that's less important to them. It's more about what you can bring, what ideas and suggestions. So it's been helping different generations come together and see the benefits of working together. But also we really encourage this concept of great ideas come from anywhere. So listening to views and opinions. For example, we have a diversity and inclusion council, and we've made sure that our apprentices are on it, because actually that age diversity helps us. So it's not just about getting the most senior people in the room and the people who've been there longest, but how can we get different views and perspectives? So that was one challenge of how we recognise that time served and hierarchy aren't necessarily going to give us what we want, but also how we develop tools and systems that all generations like working with. So, for example, we've just launched something we're calling High Five, which is our colleague recognition program, and it's an app where you can give each other recognition to peers across countries, and we've got some of our workforce say, this is fantastic. We're really excited about this. We've really wanted to be able to give recognition to people all across the world, and we've got other generations go, well, why wouldn't I just pick up the phone and say thank you, go over and chat to them? So it's this idea that different people are used to different things and different systems in different ways, and actually we need a workforce that accommodates all of that, so that managers and leaders can use the tools that mean most for the people they're leading, rather than just one way fits everyone.
It's interesting as well how there tends to be this assumption that different parts of the workforce have totally different needs, that millennials will require entirely to do everything by text, and it's the complete opposite for people of older generations. But it seems to just simply not be the case. It's such a gross generalisation, right? Have you found that they're completely off whack, those generalisations?
I think, you're absolutely right. It's always dangerous to generalise. We have found actually the age differences. There is some truth to it that we've needed to watch and observe. But actually, what we find more interesting is that it's encouraged this mindset of of respecting different views regardless. So don't generalise, but listen to what people are saying, take account of their views, understand their needs, and do that regardless of age or gender or background, but just take each individual for who they are rather than generalising. So that in itself has brought great richness to our culture, and in terms of how we work together and how we achieve things.
Yeah, crucially, I think that this idea that somehow difference innately means disadvantage, but why would that at all be the case, you know? But on that subject then, I know a big initiative of yours around values was the big conversation, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about what that was and its purpose?
Yeah, so the purpose was that we had reached a point where we decided that the values and behaviours we had served the purpose, but as we were transforming the culture, we wanted a different set of values and a different set of behaviours that were much more focused on taking us forward and to where we wanted to be in terms of a SaaS company and culture. So we decided there's numerous ways you can do that, and in the past the values and behaviours have very, very much decided by the senior leaders and then handed out, and everyone starts to read them, understand them, and start to think about how they can follow them. And actually we wanted to do something different, so we wanted the way we created the values and behaviours to reflect the culture we want to create, which is much more inclusive and much more about getting everyone's views and opinions. So we came across the idea of having what we're calling a big conversation, because we have 13,000 employees in 24 countries. So with all the best will in the world, we can't get everyone together. But we also didn't want this to take months. So we wanted something that we could do quite quickly over a condensed period of time to really get momentum and ideas flowing. So we came up with the idea of the big conversation, which was using a technology platform that's moderated by facilitators, but enabled us over a 48-hour period to invite all colleagues across Sage to write views and opinions and to share things. Oh, wow. And over the course of the 48 hours, we started narrowed down to themes, and then really started to look in depth at those themes and what they meant, and what people saw as some of the opportunities, what they saw as some of the challenges, what was good about working at Sage, what wasn't so good, and what we could do differently. And it was amazing how some really consistent themes started to develop, that over the 48 hours, with the help of the facilitators, we could really then start to get into more detail. So it meant in quite a short space of time, we gathered an awful lot of data that was going to be really useful to us in how we create our values and behaviours. But the one unexpected consequence was the way everyone felt included. So a lot of people came and said, could we do more comms that way? It was the first time that I've been able to share my view with such a big group of people. I realised that the views I had in Spain were very similar to the views people had in Canada, and there was a real connection. So there was a real buzz, and actually in terms of participation, and the partner that we work with said for organisations of our size, it was the highest participation they'd seen by far. So people really, really got involved and enjoyed doing it.
That's fantastic, and such a qualitative kind of insight as well in that way, as opposed to just having a kind of form fill or any kind of sort of long distance or long form kind of communication. You've created some kind of immediate feedback form that has that real insight as well.
And that was what was great, because we could pick out words, so truth came up, or care, and we could really say, what do you mean by that? What does that mean for you? Or what do we do well? What could we do differently? So we were able to really take the conversation and move it on. And over the course of the 48 hours, we had 9,000 comments, 4,000 employees engaged in it. So it meant it was very valid as well. We weren't just getting views from a few people. We were getting something that really represented a broad perspective across Sage.
Were you surprised by, you said some general themes kind of emerged there. Were you surprised by what they were, and was it very unexpected, or do you think, okay, this is kind of how I figured maybe this would
We were surprised. Yeah, we were surprised by a number of things. We were surprised by how people embraced it. We were surprised by how positive people were on it. So often people were identifying problems, but they always came up with solutions. So we realised something about the people who work at Sage, that they're very solution oriented, that they see opportunities but also know how to address those. So we realised we had something really powerful in our colleague base that we could really, really grow and take advantage of. So that was very positive. I think the other thing is we realised we didn't have any underlying cultural problems. So some people talk about toxic culture. Some people talk about a culture where, ultimately, things could go seriously wrong, and we realised we didn't have any of that. What we had was actually a very positive base upon which to build, and some really constructive solutions and ideas around what we could do to improve. So that really surprised us, and it gave us an awful lot of hope and confidence really for what we're going to be able to build over the next few years.
So I know another thing that you've been looking at has been performance management as well, right? And again, it's something which I feel like a lot of the leaders I'll speak to struggle with a great deal, because there are so many more ways of approaching it now, I think, in terms of the technology that's available and different schools of thought on that. But what was your approach to changing performance management in Sage?
So our approach was to throw out everything we knew about performance management and to really look at it very differently. So we had always used performance management as a backward looking, so looking back over the year, what went well, what didn't go well. We had always used it to focus on what could be improved, so it inevitably became a sort of negative conversation even for great
it's
performers.
Funny that how it somehow becomes innately negative quickly, right? Because you're assessing everything.
You're assessing everything. You're justifying why you're giving people the rating you are. You're justifying what that means in terms of their salary, and it became quite a negative conversation even for some of our best performers and most talented people. And it also became a conversation that we spent a lot of time in the business thinking about the conversations, spending time managing force distribution curves, but none of it was good time. It felt like managing a process. So we threw all of that out the window and really started to think about what was wrong with the system, and how we could start to think about future focus, so how we could help people become even better, how we could do it in a way that was more timely. There's no point getting feedback on something you did a year ago. Kind of the impact's gone. So how we could get something that's more timely, that's more regular. Goals that you set at the beginning of the year, most of them probably aren't relevant 12 months later. So we decided to do something that was much more about regular conversations, so less of the big appraisal and much more around regular conversations, regular feedback, both positive but also improvement, but always aimed at getting better. How can you help this person become even better? With a lot more responsibility for the manager, not to point out what was wrong, but to ask what you could do differently, how can I help, how can I support, and how we can enable and really enable our colleagues to thrive. So it's much more future focused, much more regular, a regular review of goals, so making sure that through the year we could change and make amendments as the business needs changed. But also that time together, what we found is that a lot of managers weren't prioritising having one-to-ones on a regular basis, and that's actually been the power of what we've created, is that mechanism by which managers realise that a regular monthly or even quarterly one-to-one has much more impact than a big review at the end of the year.
Of course, and I suppose you feel as well to some degree like your manager or your company is more invested in your development, or if they're taking that time. It's that face-to-face time as well, and having a conversation, right, is so much different than, because I personally, when it comes to filling in maybe a form, like I just don't really feel like doing it most of the time, but a conversation I think is always going to be more impactful.
Yeah, it is, and we've focused a lot less on the form filling, so there's 2 or 3 questions that we use the system, and they're there really to prompt the discussion.
Of course, yeah.
And to get you thinking about different things. And we ask managers to write maybe 2 or 3 lines, no more. So something very quick in the moment. So again, it doesn't become a big burden of, doing year-end reviews and having to spend a day writing them all up. It's much more fluid, it's much more in the moment. But it's that record that you can keep easily and refer back to. And, being able to do it on a system, you can do it on an iPhone, you can do it in lots of different ways. So it makes it, as you say, less about the form filling and more about the conversation, which is where we want
and making it easier as well. As you say, technology does definitely play a huge part of that as well. Like making it mobile enabled as well seems like such a no-brainer, right? Because it makes it so much more immediate. You can access it in so many other places in different ways. But speaking then of making these things easier and putting employees first, I know wellbeing has been important as well in this kind of transformation that you've gone through. So why was that, and then how did it come about?
Well, and there's always a number of reasons why these things come about. One is because if we want to we talk about creating a culture where our colleagues can thrive, and that's what we seek to do in all of our ways of working, and the way we train and develop our managers, and the way we hire leaders. But also we recognise that we needed to create an environment where people could bring their whole selves to work and be open and honest. And that meant being open and honest where people were suffering and needed help and support. So whether it's suffering through mental illness, whether it's a physical disability, we wanted people to be able to be open about that and share that, because we felt that, one, if we knew early, we can often help and support more quickly. Right. But also we were realising, on the hard side of it, we were realising that absence and stress-related absence is increasingly in most workplaces becoming the most common reason for absence, was taking a real toll on our business. And what we wanted to think about is how we could proactively help and support people who were suffering from stress, either by starting to remove those stressors if they were work-related, or if they weren't work-related, how we can adopt some early warning signs and then help and support that person to get the external help they needed. So it was really coming at it from different angles, but understanding if we were really going to create an organisation and a culture where colleagues could thrive, we needed to address it.
As you say, there is a far more holistic approach, it seems, than simply saying, okay, how can we help you at work? It's all those other factors that can influence it as well. And I suppose having such a varied workforce as well would make a huge difference as well to how you approach well-being. Yeah. Generally speaking, do you think that when you look at most organisations and people leaders, do you think our approach to well-being is largely effective, or do you think we've got quite a long way to go?
I think we've got a long way to go. I think we're just starting the conversation, and I think a lot of external organisations, things like the Samaritans or Mind, are bringing a lot more awareness to issues and challenges that people face in their everyday life, and how I think once we become more open and able to talk about those things, and it's not seen as something that you should be embarrassed about or hold from your employer, it's something you can share, then that means we can, I think, start to, as organisations, start to support. And most organisations are not professionals in handling mental health and other challenges. So I think it's really about thinking about how we can partner and support people, but then enable them to find the real support we needed. And that's why we brought in a program called the Mental Health First Aiders program. So a bit like we train people, with a first aid kit and some plasters and bandages, and but we would ultimately call an ambulance if needed. And it was that idea that there's somebody that trained people on site that people can go and have a confidential conversation with, and then we can, if they need more help and support, we can point them in the right direction to do that. So that early warning sign, that early detection. But we also spent more time with our leaders and managers, starting to train them to understand, to use the one-to-one conversations and the performance reviews, just to ask how people are, and to encourage more of a holistic view of lifestyle, and make sure, if people are burning out, ultimately that's going to be a problem for us and them. So how do we avoid that happening? And one of the areas that we've looked at, and I know many other organisations are, is general health and wellbeing. So we have Wellbeing Week, where we look at diet and exercise and encouraging all of those things, again, because if people are going to bring their best selves to work, they need balance, and we need to create an environment where they can get that and they're not afraid to ask.
So how have you set about trying to empower employees at Sage People?
So the empowerment has been around helping people understand where they can make a difference. It has been around making sure people are clear on what they're accountable for, because accountability is important. To be empowered, you need to be able to make decisions and to support those decisions and see them through. And then also supporting our leaders and managers in the way that they coach and develop, to make sure people do feel they've got the space and empowerment to do things. It was interesting. It was one of the big things that came out of our big conversation, was around people would like to feel more empowered for things they do. So we have made some changes to our organisation structure so that people are clear on their roles and responsibilities. So we call it freedom within a framework. So we're clear on the framework, and we're clear on people what people can't do and what need further approvals or further agreements, but ultimately help people see clearly where they have got decision-making power and can make those decisions and take them through. But also by the mechanisms by which we create opportunities for conversation and dialogue, enables people to feel like they've got a voice, and they can put views forward. And then ultimately we help people through, for example, we have through our Chief Technology Officer, we run a number of innovation campaigns where we ask people for ideas for new new services on our products, different ways of doing things, and then we sponsor those innovation ideas as they come through. So it's really all about creating this space where people can step in and make ideas and feel empowered to do things differently, but holding people accountable for delivering on those and seeing those through, so that people get more confidence, the organisation gets more confidence that this more empowered way of working actually achieves results, and it enables everyone to step forward then.
And I think, again, it allows that transformation to have more of a longer shelf life as well, I suppose. If you're empowering people to do that, as you say, to create these solutions, and you become self-sufficient in a sense, I suppose, right? So it's kind of long-lasting transformation. On that note, for any people leaders, HR leaders that are listening and want to start an enormous transformation like this, a cultural transformation, but haven't the faintest idea of where to begin, what would be your kind of top tip, do you think, or first tip maybe to kind of help them along the way?
I think it's about observing and listening to your organisation first. I think transformations that aim to completely change every aspect of an organisation in one go rarely work. It's about taking the organisation and the opportunity you've got and thinking about how you can really make that perform at its best, and then looking at the areas where you'll have greatest impact and the areas where it may take a longer time but you can start making some traction. Because I think your organisation transformation is really about unleashing the potential of the organisation, not trying to put a completely different organisation on top of it. And I think you can only get that really by observing and listening before you jump in. So really thinking about what you've got, what the potential and what the opportunity is, and then how you unleash that. I think that's the best way to get started.
Wonderful. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been fantastic, and hopefully we can have you back again soon.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRD Live Podcast with Amanda Cusdin, Chief People Officer of Sage. If you enjoyed this episode, you could subscribe on hrdconnect.com or via iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for a new episode every week. See you next time.